Ron DeSantis is trying to capitalize on this crisis. You saw that he has like his own Air DeSantis flying people out of Israel and everything. Well, he was on one of the talk shows talking about all the people in Gaza. Let's listen to this.
Of the 2 million people who live in Gaza, half of them are under the age of 18. Let's take a listen to something you said yesterday.
We cannot accept people from Gaza into this country as refugees. I am not going to do that. If you look at how they behave, not all of them are Hamas, but they are all anti-Semitic.
I'm sure you know all Arabs are Semites, but how can you paint with such a broad brush to say 2.3 million people are anti-Semitic?
Well, first of all, my position is very clear. Those Gaza refugees, Palestinian Arabs, should go to Arab countries. The U.S. should not be absorbing any of those. I think the culture, so they elected Hamas. Let's just be clear about that. Not everyone's a member of Hamas. Most probably aren't, but they did elect Hamas.
In 2006, and then the military occupation happened after that, where they went in and haven't allowed elections since 2007. So in 2006, there was an election.
But there was a lot of celebrating of those attacks in the Gaza Strip by a lot of those folks who were not Hamas. But if you look at their education system, this has been an issue for a long time. They teach kids to hate Jews. The textbooks do not have Israel even on the map. They prepare very young kids to commit terrorist attacks. So I think it's a toxic culture. And I think if we were to import large numbers of those to the United States, I think it would increase anti-Semitism in this country. And I think it would increase anti-Americanism in this country.
Okay. So do you want to comment on this, or should we play Nikki Haley? She was asked.
We can go to Haley if you want. I definitely want to comment on this.
According to recent polling earlier this year from the Washington Institute, which is a pro-Israel group, using the polling of Palestinian Center for Public Opinion, 62% of Gazans wanted the ceasefire with Israel to stay in place. 50% of Gazans want Hamas to stop calling for Israel's destruction, want Hamas to accept a permanent two-state solution based on the 1967 borders. 70% of Gazans wanted the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank to take over Gaza. So I'm not really certain that Governor DeSantis has a real read on the difference between Hamas and the people of Gaza. What was your response when you heard what Governor DeSantis said?
You know, I dealt with this every day for 2 years. And, you know, what I can tell you is you have to realize that whether we're talking about Gazans and Palestinians, you know, all of them don't. You've got half of them at the time that I was there didn't want to be under Hamas's rule. They didn't want to have terrorists overseeing them. They knew that they were living a terrible life because of Hamas. You had the other half that supported Hamas and wanted to be a part of that. We see that with Iran, too. The Iranian people don't want to be under that Iranian regime. They don't. We saw what happened to Mahsa Amini. We saw how they treat them. There are so many of these people who want to be free from this terrorist rule. They want to be free from all of that. And America's always been sympathetic to the fact that you can separate civilians from terrorists.
Okay, so Will, there seems to be kind of a difference of opinion there.
Yeah. Okay. So, folks, look, I am Jewish. It's painful to me and my community that so many Jews were murdered in this Hamas attack. Just going to stipulate that I have a personal interest in this topic. Having said that, what Ron DeSantis said here, this is how evil happens on the other side. This is how we become the bad guys. In the name of fighting prejudice, right? He says they're all anti-Semitic. He doesn't say Hamas is anti-Semitic, which is true. He says all the Palestinians in Gaza are anti-Semitic, right? And Margaret Brennan points out that half of them are under 18. Ron DeSantis says it doesn't matter. He said they teach the kids to be anti-Semitic. The children of Gaza, he's saying, are presumptively anti-Semitic and shouldn't be allowed to come to the United States. Okay, so that's one step. He says, you know, they elected Hamas, right? And Margaret Brennan points out that was in 2006. That's 17 years ago. 17 years ago, and when she says they haven't allowed an election, she's not talking about Israel. She's talking about Hamas. Hamas has not allowed a vote in Gaza. So, and then Tapper has he has the numbers from the poll, right? So that it's bullshit. What DeSantis is saying is just wrong about what people in Gaza believe.
But I mean, but the larger point though is he's trying to say there should be collective guilt, and that we should not, that no one from Gaza should ever be allowed in. But and I have another soundbite for you, because then this also can translate into, therefore we shouldn't have any sympathy for what is about to happen to anyone here. Here's Tom Cotton, a Republican senator from Arkansas, talking about the coming attack on Gaza and the possibility of massive civilian casualties.
Israel has inflicted no suffering on Gaza. Hamas is responsible for the suffering in Gaza. They've been in charge there for 16 years. They didn't have to spend the billions of dollars they get from countries like Iran on things like tunnels and missiles. They could have spent it on water and power plants. Hamas is their sole responsibility for any suffering the people of Gaza have already had, or for any civilian casualties in Gaza, because Hamas intentionally uses women and children and the elderly for human shields. And if you don't want your hospitals or your schools or your mosque bombed, you shouldn't use them for military purposes.
But you know the images that we're going to get. They're going to say this is Israel. They are carpet bombing and blanketing the Gaza Strip in a way that leaves, first of all, food and water cut off, a humanitarian crisis and destruction there.
Shannon, as far as I'm concerned, Israel can bounce the rubble in Gaza. Anything that happens in Gaza is the responsibility of Hamas.
Let's parse this out, because on one level, I want to agree that everything that's happening is because of what Hamas began the atrocities. It wants to inspire more, right? I mean, it is causes. On the other hand, there's something breathtaking about Tom, Cotton essentially saying, whatever happens when they bounce the rubble, it's not Israel's fault. I mean, it's how do you parse out the clear guilt and responsibility of Hamas without basically saying, and here's a complete blank check for Israel to do anything to anyone in Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
And this is where you just feel that there ought to be some moral clarity here, but it's going to be painful and it's going to be difficult, and there are no good answers to this, I think.
Yeah, no. I agree with you. The blank check thing is the scary part here. Charlie, I agree with you about moral clarity, right? Moral clarity says things like Hamas is deliberately targeting civilians.
True.
Israel may end up killing civilians, but it won't be deliberate. It would be inadvertent, right? And that distinction matters. The way that Hamas conducted its invasion, targeting civilians rather than soldiers, that's relevant. These are all parts of moral clarity. But part of moral clarity can't mean that we completely disregard any other moral considerations because we're the righteous ones. That's not moral clarity, right? That's blindness. That's ideology. That's dogmatism. And that is the road to hell, when you think you're so righteous that nothing you do can be wrong. So when Tom Cotton says that last line, anything that happens in Gaza is the responsibility of Hamas, he is giving a blank check. And just because you are the more morally right party in a war does not mean you can do anything, right? You still have the laws of war. What makes you different is that you respect the laws of war. You respect the distinction between enemy soldiers and civilians. So no, it is not true that anything that happens in Gaza is entirely the fault of Hamas, right? There must still be proportionate behavior by the Israelis.
You're still responsible for your own behavior. I mean, yes,
absolutely.
I mean, this is the overwhelming guilt here is Hamas, but that does not mean that everyone else then is absolved of responsibility for the decisions that they make and the acts that they take. Okay, so another soundbite here. Your good friend, Lindsey Graham, because of course people who've listened to this and watched this know that Will has written the definitive account of Lindsey Graham's descent into authoritarianism. You can buy the book, you can read the article, you can listen to the podcast. So Lindsey Graham was on yesterday and has a couple of interesting things to say. Here's Lindsey Graham.
If Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran, launches a massive attack on Israel, I will consider that a threat to the state of Israel, existential in nature. I will introduce a resolution in the United States Senate to allow military action by the United States in conjunction with Israel to knock Iran out of the oil business. Iran, if you escalate this war, we're coming for you.
You are a student of Lindsey Graham. That's like the old, saber rattling Lindsey, though, isn't it?
Right, it is. Now, last week you were saying, I was talking about, if only we could retaliate against Iran. And you pointed out, look, be careful what you wish for, right? You don't want to expand this war. In fact, all of American diplomacy is to try to limit it.
Right.
But in the name of trying to limit it, Lindsey is now explicitly threatening United States, not Israeli, United States military engagement attacking Iran, right? And what's interesting to me about this, in addition to that it's a little bit dangerous to talk this way, is who exactly made Lindsey Graham in charge of Joe Biden's foreign policy, right? And the answer is nobody. The answer is nobody. But this is why, this is a major reason why Lindsey Graham became a Trump flunky, because he loved, when Trump was president, he could say, you in Iran, I have been talking to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump's my buddy, and he's going to do the following to you if you come into this
credibility.
conflict, right? But he doesn't have that now. So now he just has to say, I'm going to introduce some resolution in the Senate.
Okay, so Lindsey Graham is, in fact, as you accurately describe him, a Trump flunky. But on that same program, he said that Trump's comments about how smart Hezbollah was and his attacks on Israel being a bunch of jerks and idiots and everything was a big mistake. I hesitate to ask this question because I think you and I both know the answer. But there was a lot of sort of Henry like, will this latest gaffe by Donald Trump, will this make a difference? The fact that at this moment, he makes it all about himself, of the narcissism of Donald. See, the thing about Donald Trump, and again, just to come back to it, there's no ideology here. There's no through line of principle. It's all about him. It's all about his grievances and everything. So he's mad at Benjamin Netanyahu because Benjamin Netanyahu called up Joe Biden and congratulated him. So, Trump tried to walk back his comments about how smart Hezbollah was, that, there's no better friend of Israel. But, and even Lindsey Graham's calling him out on, but it's not going to make a difference, is it? Because we're like way past that. We're way past any moment at which anything Donald Trump does is actually going to be the breaking point, right?
Right. There is no breaking.
Or do you have a more optimistic view than that? I'm open to this.
No, I don't. And there's 2 points here, Charlie. One is the political point you're making, that the Republican voters don't care about any of this. They still vote for Trump no matter what. But the other thing is, it's just amazing to me that people like Lindsey Graham are always trying to draw this distinction between, Donald Trump just said this outrageous thing, like attacking, criticizing Netanyahu and claiming that he didn't support Trump when Israel's literally under a deadly attack. And at the same time, so Lindsey Graham says he shouldn't say this stuff, but he keeps calling it, what is it, a mistake? This is not a mistake, right? What's lacking here is Donald Trump is a very bad person, right? Who doesn't care about anything but himself. That's why he says what he says about Israel. That's why he says, let's overturn the Constitution.
That's why it is so dangerous for anyone who cares about America's role in the world to even entertain the possibility of returning Donald Trump to the Oval Office. And of all the people who should know that, shouldn't Lindsey Graham be like at the front of the line?
Totally. And this is but the scary thing, Charlie, is if Donald Trump wins the presidency again, it will be with the help of a bunch of people who literally think this. They think, I don't like Trump's mean tweets or whatever, but, he was good on the economy or whatever, and we can manage him. We'll just limit the damage he does to Israel or the Constitution or whatever.
And Lindsey will be the Secretary of Defense or something, and he'll talk himself into I will protect the world from him because I'll be his Secretary of Defense for like 5 minutes until, I get thrown into the bus by the Donald.
Right, and what we have to convince these people of is you don't get to choose. You don't get Trump a la carte. You get Trump, and Trump's going to do all the bad stuff you don't like, in addition to the things you think he did well.